Good evening, everyone, and welcome to day 9 of our Salesforce platform developer. Tonight, we're training. Tonight, we're going to continue with our Apex trigger, and we're going to be looking into some of the advanced concepts in Apex as well. So yesterday, we stopped at working with the trigger events. Okay, let me quickly go into developer console and start with what we have today. So yesterday we looked into a few concepts when it comes to Apex trigger. Okay.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Just mute yourself if you're not speaking. Okay. So let's continue. If you want to create a trigger, you go to Apex trigger, okay? Not Apex class. Apex class is different from Apex trigger. Visual Force page is different from Visual Force component, okay? Like whatever you want to create in Salesforce, you have to select that thing. So don't select Apex class when you want to start Apex trigger, and don't select Apex trigger when you want to start writing Apex classes, okay? So let's go into our Apex class, the one we created yesterday. I'm not sure if we saved it. Let me look for it. I go to triggers. Yeah, I think we saved it. So this was what we did yesterday, okay? We learned about the before inserts, before updates, and the likes. One thing I also taught you was the use of unless, meaning that you don't need to write code inside this condition. You just have to write it in a class, instantiate the class, and you call that class. So check all opportunities is present in the account trigger handler. And if I have to open the class, the account trigger handler, you will see the code, okay? This is the code we wrote yesterday regarding check all opportunities. And we're able to call it from the trigger. One thing I also taught you is you do not just run the code every time there's a trigger on your account. You need to specifically state where you want the code to run. For instance, is it before or after? Okay. And is it before, even if it's before, is it before insert? Is it before update or before delete? Similarly, if it's after, is it after insert, after update, or after delete? In addition to that, I showed you the documentation for Apex, okay? I showed you how you can get whatever we've done within the document, okay? One thing I also taught you about the context variable, okay? The context variable are what is available for you. For instance, trigger.new, which is a return of the new version of the Salesforce object. For that, we had to do trigger.new to give you the return of the records we are creating in this object. So if you go to new, this is trigger.new. Whatever you're putting in here is trigger.new. And trigger.old is the existing records. What does that mean? It means that if I have an existing record and I update this record, the updates I'm making is trigger.new. However, the existing record is trigger.old. Okay? That's how you manipulate things. That's how you get old values and new values. One thing I also taught you was, I said, when you're writing Apex trigger, you should only have one trigger on an object. Okay? Do not have as many trigger files on an object. You should only have one. That means you have to put all your trigger. You have to put is before, and all the codes for is before trigger should go here. Okay? And you have else. Okay? Else if trigger is after. And all the code for after should go here. So this was what we learned yesterday, right? But more importantly, I told you that you don't have to, for instance, is before, you still need to be checking. Trigger, remember, if it is before, you still need to check is updates, no, is insert. Okay? You check if it's insert, and you do insert transaction here. Similarly, you can check else if trigger dot is updates, and you do all update transaction here. Else, okay? Else if trigger dot is delete, then you do all the transaction of is delete here. Insert code. This stuff is not hard, okay? You just need to pay attention. Update code. Then delete code. But you don't need to put the code here. You just need to call the method. Okay? You just need to call the method and just put the method here. Do you get what I mean? So you can just say is insert, and you go to your handler class to go write that is insert method that you're calling. Public, the way you write you can write void, you can write static, you can write whatever it is, but let's use void for now, is insert, whatever inputs you want, and you write that method here. So now you've created a method, you've called the method, and you can now put the code in the method, okay? So now, this is a structure. If I put the same code here, I can just say trigger.isInsert, trigger.update, trigger.delete, right? The same thing, but the only difference is this should only be calling in a trigger is after, whereas this will be calling in a trigger is before. Now, this might seem like, okay, it's not that bad, but there are better ways to write programming. There are better ways to write programming. And I told you, instead of writing all this, you can use what they call operation type. So let's look at how to use operation type trigger. It just helps you with switch. So instead of you saying, where's operation type here? Let me look for it. Operation type makes it easier. It will make it easier for you. I'm looking for example of operation type. It will make it easier for you to actually replace everything you have here. So everything you have here, can you see how the condition is long? But you can replace everything, okay? You can replace everything with operation type. So you don't need to be checking for is this, is that. All you just need to do is declare a switch. Okay? Let's quickly do this. And how is operation type used? Trigger dot is operation type. So what are you checking? When it is before insert, when it is after insert, don't worry about all this stuff. It's nothing. It's just the guy trying to follow stuff. When it is before insert, when it is after insert, when it's before update, after update. So what does that mean? It means that instead of me writing all this if, else, if before, if is trigger insert, else if trigger is update, like it's okay. It works. This works, which is fine. But the length and the lines of code is longer compared to when you use trigger dot operation type. So trigger dot operation type has inbuilt enum. Enum is when things are specific in a range, right? So before insert is available in operation type. Before updates, before deletes, after insert, after updates, after deletes, after undeletes. So instead of you saying if trigger dot is before and is if trigger dot is insert, you just replace it with before insert, and you put the code for before insert here. Then if it is after insert, instead of saying else if trigger dot is after insert is after, and if trigger dot is insert, instead of writing two conditions, you just use a switch on after insert. As you can see, the switch which I introduced you to as part of control flows is now being used in your trigger. The bottom line is the before insert is inbuilt. So trigger dot operation type would return before insert, after insert, before update, after update, and the likes. But make sure that the trigger event is stated in the inputs. Okay. So now that you've seen how to do that, let's kind of like have a very good example of working with trigger, an advanced reason why you should be using trigger. Okay. We just want to have an advanced reason why you should be using trigger, because trigger seems easy, but that's not the whole reason why you should be using trigger. You can't just be saying before you create an account, you want to manipulate the description or you want to manipulate the rating. That's too basic. Now, I told you we have sets and we have maps. What are they and why do we need them? We need them because it's obviously sets and maps are collections. They're used to collect data in a bulk format. So why do we need them? We need them because it makes processing of data faster. It makes it easier. When you have a list, like this, you will query, for instance, okay? And you will query and it will look through accounts to even use the things inside the account list you just received from this query. To use those things, you have to do a for loop, right? So you have to look through that, and it's harder to look for an item in a for loop because you have to look through all the items. But let's say we want to, okay, the case study is this. I have a department field in a user object, okay? I have a department field in a user object. Anytime a record is being created on, let's say, account objects, I want to look up the department of the user that is creating the record from the user objects. And I want to store the department in the account record. So for us to do this case study, what do we need to do? First of all, we need to have a department in the user objects. I go to user, And I look for I create a new field called departments, okay? Test, department. So I have created a new field called departments on the user objects. What does that mean? It means if I want to create a new user, or I can edit an existing user, okay? This is how you create extra fields on the user, okay? You go to departments and you put engineering. Perfect. So we know that Olajide has a department it belongs to a department called engineering, okay? Obviously, department is a field. It's not like an object whereby you look for the relationship and stuff like that. We're just doing a basic example here. Now, anytime I'm creating an account records, I want to store department of the user. What do I want to call it? I want to call it creator owner department, okay? Owner department. So the owner of the record, I want to replace the department, okay? Not replace, but to save the department. Because when I'm creating an account, I don't have the department of that user. Now, how do I solve this? I can solve this using set and map. It makes it easier. Remember, I cannot do a for loop. I cannot query inside a for loop. That means I cannot say select user, select department, okay, from user when I'm inside a for loop. So how do I find the owner? How do I find the owner that created this new account? Look at this new account. How do I find the owner? And how do I collect the department from the user object and populate the department in the account object? So the first thing is you need to do what? That means you need to collect what they call all the owner's ID. You want to collect the owner ID that is creating this account, okay? You want to collect the owner ID that is creating the new account, which is this. Remember, you can always see the account owner here, but you cannot see the department like this until you go to the user and you go to the department. That's how you get the department, okay? So I want to find out the ID of that owner. How do I find the ID of that owner? I look for accounts that is coming into the system. What do I want to do? I want to find out the owner ID. That's it. But now that I've found the owner ID, let me debug the owner ID so you can see it. This is the owner ID. Okay? So now okay? I just want to make sure this stuff runs. Let's delete this, save. I don't need that. Okay, so now let's save this and just quickly create an account. New account. I want to find out the owner ID. But before, okay, let me just find out the owner ID. Save. If I go to my developer console, I'll find out the owner ID. The owner ID is this. Perfect. But now, what do I do with the owner ID? What do I do with the owner ID? I want to query. I want to find the user of this owner ID, and I want to be able to get what? The department. Okay? So list user. Okay? The user of this ID. I'm going to call one of you guys in subsequent classes to come and write code live. Okay? So you guys should be ready. Department. Because it's always easier when I look at some of your projects, I'm not too impressed. It's always easier when I'm writing this, even though it's nothing. But when you guys are given projects, it becomes harder. Okay, so I need to find out if you guys are okay. Right now, where the ID matches, right? Where the ID equals that user ID that we just found out in the log. We want to check for this ID. That's what we want to do. But if we had to do that, it means that we have to put this query inside here, and we have to do this, right? But according to Salesforce, this is wrong. It is wrong because you're putting a for loop in a query. You're putting a for loop in a query. Let's look at the error for a minute. Unexpected token, ACC dots, so ID, ACC dot owner ID. This is just 1 minute. Why is it saying unexpected token? So you have ACC owner ID. Okay. You need to put this, okay? So now, basically, this is the logical way of doing things. I have the ID of this user, and I want to get what? The department. So I do what? This is the department of the owner. Then make sure that so if I create a new department does not exist. Variable department does not exist. Okay. Remember, you get a list, right? You get a list. That means you just want one element of that list. Okay? You want just one element of that list. Alternatively, you can do a for loop again, like for loop of this user, and you can now get a department. But obviously, I know that only one user would have this owner ID. So I don't need to worry about whether the ID exists on. I don't need to worry about whether the first element would not have the user I'm interested in. The first element would definitely have the user I'm interested in because the owner ID can only be unique in the system. Now, let's go and create a new account. Okay? Save. If you go to the debug logs, what are you going to get? This is the department of the owner, engineering. Perfect. But this is a bad code according to Apex. Do you know why? Because it says in Apex, you should not do a for loop. You should not do a query inside a for loop. Think about it from what I told you when we're doing SOQL. When we're doing SOQL, at the end of your query, you get all this. At the end of your query, you're going to get all this. So now, if you have 1,000 users in the system and you want to check something, you're going to do for select 1,000. And if you have 1,000 accounts, you're going to do for the accounts coming in, and you are going to keep writing query, but you have limitation on the number of SOQL queries you can make. You have only 100, and DMS statements, you have 150. If you have to update the accounts dot department with this, and maybe you want to say update. You're going to update almost the number of accounts that is present in the system. This is not the way to do this. This is going to go beyond your governor limits, and it is going to break. Okay? How should you do this? The same approach, but with a programming mindset. What does that mean? What do I need? I need the owner ID from trigger.new. So all I just need to do is say, okay, what can I use to store IDs? Knowing that IDs should always be unique. What can I use to store IDs? Knowing that owner ID should always be unique. I will use what they call the set. The set of ID, as described, owner IDs equals new set of ID. Meaning, if I get my ID, as you can see, I've gotten the ID of account. Instead of calling this query immediately and changing the value of the owner department to the account, no, I will just store that ID. So let's quickly store the ID. I'll store the ID in a set because I want to use the ID in future. Okay? So what else do I need to do? I have this, but remember, I got this owner IDs of a set dot add. Okay? What do I want to add? I want to add ACC dot owner ID. Okay? Which is the same as this. But I don't want to query immediately. Nope. I just want to add it and that's it. Now, I have collected all the owner ID of the accounts coming inside. Good. I store it in the owner IDs. What do I need to do next? What do I want next? Obviously, I want this query, right? But if I have this query, how can I manipulate this query? How can I manipulate this query for all the IDs? It's going to be very hard to get the IDs. Okay? How is going to get the ID? How are you going to get the ID? The first thing you have to do is you query. Then you now do a for loop. Okay? A for loop on all the user. A for loop on all the user. Then you want to get the, like it's going to be a lengthy process. It's going to be a lengthy process to just get a department because of this ID. So what you want to do here is you want to use a map. A map will give you ID and whatever Salesforce objects, whatever string you want. Okay? If you have a map, you can declare a map as ID and string. Can you see? You can declare a map as string and string. You can declare a map as anything and anything. But remember, when we're declaring a map, what were the use cases for declaring a map? We want to collect the Salesforce records, right? So if I have map, I can collect ID and user, meaning that this user is going to be the Salesforce objects. And I'll say all owners in system. That means I'm creating a map of all the owners in the system. And I say new map, which is ID, user, and I query select ID department from user. That's it. That means this will give me all the users in the system and it will store it into a map of users. Remember, how do you instantiate a map? Map Salesforce, Apex. How do you instantiate a map? You instantiate a map by getting the map of two things. You always have a key and value pair. So what have I done? I've only done this. I haven't done anything different. I've only done this. The only difference is account is user. Okay? Account is user. And now I have gotten this. So copying this and just putting it here. So if I have this, how can I get departments? So if you have a user like this, how do you get the department from a map? Based on the ID. Get key. So what does the get key? What does it do? Dot get Mangetta. What is Mangetta? Mangetta is, there's no Mangetta there. Let's go to the other one. Let's use a get element, okay? Get. Get blue, okay? Get blue. Okay, this is just asserting. I don't want assert. I want something more concrete. Let me look for the map methods, and I want to get the map. Okay. So if you want to get blue, you're going to get blue, right? What is blue? Blue is this. Okay. So you're getting the value. Get blue would give you the value of blue because this is a key value pair. So now going by this, if I want to get something, how do I get it? I just need to pass the ID that I want to get and get it, right? So if I want to get a particular user, I can just call m dot get, then I put the key, the ID of what I'm getting. And if I want to get a field of that user, I can just call whatever field I want from the user, okay? That is the same approach we're going to use here. Don't worry about this. I have set of ID. I collect all owners' ID. Collect all the owner IDs that is coming into the trigger. That's what I've just done there. Now, instantiate instantiates a map of all users. Okay? Now, if I query this, the ID would be the key, and the user would be all the things I'm querying from the user. Okay? Now, I have that map. What do I want to do with this data? I want to go back to my for loop. I want to go back to my for loop. For accounts and trigger.new. What do I want to do? Remember our problem. Our problem is that account's owner department. I want to make it equal to the department of the user. How do I get the department of the user? All accounts in the system. Dots, not dots, dots gets, okay? What ID am I looking for? I'm looking for the account ID, okay? The account ID. And the account ID is this for the owner ID in the accounts. So all accounts in the system, the owner ID of the account that is coming in, I'm getting the department out of that owner ID. That is how to solve the problem. Instead of querying this, instead of doing this, instead of doing this, instead of doing this, we have improved the code such that it does not have any query inside a for loop and is still doing the same thing. This is an improved code compared to this. Even though this is a logical way, like, the way your brain will process, this is the way your brain will think. But the thing about this is that it's going to look through accounts, the number of times we have the account in the system. For instance, if you're loading 1,000 accounts, 10,000 accounts, for 10,000 times, this stuff will loop 10,000 times. The only difference is this. This stuff is looping 10,000 times, but also querying. Can you see this query? It's querying this stuff. So if this stuff has a lot of records and is returning 10,000 records, but you have limited records you can return in a query, you're going to get to a governor limit. We've improved this by, first of all, getting all the owner IDs and store it. That's the first thing we did. We get all the owner's ID and store it in a set. We know that a set would only contain unique ID. So I store all the owner's ID in a set. Fine. Done. That is the owner ID of the account that is being created. Now that I know all the owner's ID, actually I needed to put a clause here where ID is in, otherwise it defeats the purpose of you having owner IDs, right? Where ID is in owner IDs. Okay? You need to put a clause there because now you are querying only the users that have this owner ID present. But because this is a set, is a collection, we use in. If it's just a one element, we are going to use equal to. Okay? So understand the difference between in and equal to. Equal to is you're very specific. I have just one ID. With in, I have a list, a collection. So you're checking for users inside a collection. Okay? So now that I have the users, then I go back to my query, to my for loop. But instead of collecting the ID, I just want to replace the department of that account with the department that matches the owner ID of the account that is coming in. based on the user. I know this is kind of like very tricky because if your brain cannot process things by just visualizing the query, you have to think carefully what we're doing here. What we're doing here is we're using set and map. Set to store IDs and map to make it easier for us to retrieve the value of a particular field based on the ID that matches that field or that record in the system. Because the account owner ID here is going to be the ID of the user. That's what we're looking for. Then we just replace the department ID. We did not replace, we equate, we store the value of the department based on what we have for that user. Okay? This is a very typical or a very good use case of set and map. There's so many use cases, but this is the beginning. This is the basics. If you can get this, you can get anything with set and map. The whole idea is, what do you have before? And what would you like to do? Given that, we should be able to use new map and old map. We should be able to use that. Let me see how Salesforce use new map and old map. If you look at how Salesforce is using set, the same thing Salesforce did. Can you see? Although this is on opportunity line item and price book, but look at it. For every opportunity line item record, add its associated price book entry. So we're using account and user, but they are using opportunity line item and they're using opportunity line item and price book. So they created a set of price book, add the opportunity line item price book ID. After that, query the price book in the set that you created. After that, exactly what we did. The only difference is they use a different object. This is exactly what we just did. Can you see that Salesforce is almost the same thing? The only difference is, what is the question you're trying to solve? What exactly is the question you're trying to solve? That's Salesforce for you. That's Salesforce for you. So I want to quickly put a pause here to find out if what I have just explained, if it resonates with everything we've been learning. Does this make sense? I need to know, because I don't even want to touch complex stuff. I want to touch the basics of the Apex trigger and the use case of that Apex trigger so you can actually relate with it. This stuff is not hard. I know that it's a new concept for you, but I want you to understand why we are doing it. If you understand why we're doing it, when you go to the work, they will ask you to update certain things. Then you will be able to update it because you understand why they're doing it. So let me quickly put a pause to find out if everyone is okay with this. Then I'll teach you one or two things regarding public classes, private classes, and we can ask other questions around the class. Okay? So please, if you have any question, please, can you raise your hand? Okay, Saga, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Yes, hi, Babatope. So for me, I think if you can maybe go back and explain how you put the owner ID with not this one, the on the top when you were doing the loop.
This one?
And the SQL, yes. So I was actually trying to do something like this, but it wasn't working. Is it because of the you putting the user ID 0? That's why it's working?
Yes, because this is a list. This is a list. What you get when you query is always a list. Only if you change this, okay? If you change this to this, then you don't need to put that stuff. If you change it to just one record, a list is a lot of records, right? If you change this to just one record, limit 1, then you probably don't need to put this because it's going to give you just one record. This will give you just one record, but this will give you a list, like a lot of users, even though you know that definitely it's going to be one user. But according to the query, you're going to be getting a lot of users, a list, a collection. A collection is different from an instance, a record. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. So I think, I think I understood, but then I think what I'm still processing is, I mean, I get it. It's the ID and the account dot owner ID. That's how they're connected, right? That's the link between the account and the owner ID, correct? Like it's a lookup or something, right?
Oh, no. Yeah, it's like a lookup, right? Like when you go to an account, you see an owner, but this is a name of the account owner. Until you go into that record, because it's a lookup, there's a relationship, then you can get details of that, which is one of the details is the ID. This is the owner ID, but you cannot get it directly from the account because the only thing you get from the account is the name.
But in the back end, if we go on the back end, the account owner would exactly be the ID, right? That record ID. We'll refer to that record ID, right?
So if you go to the account owner, the account owner is a lookup to the user.
Oh, I mean, if you go on the inspector and look for that field, the value is the record ID of the user, right?
Yes, this is the normal relationship stuff in Salesforce. You don't get the name as such. You only get the ID associating a lookup, right? So it's the ID you get, but visually you get the name. But obviously, Salesforce will not put ID here, right? Salesforce will put the account name here. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Is there any other question before we continue? Is there any other question? Okay. This is a very good use case. If you want us to have another use case, I can have another use case for you, right? But then again, it's a very good use case. So the other use case I can create is this. Let's say we're going to use the same thing, but let's say we have a case. This is for those that are doing their work experience. If you have a case, let me use another file. I want to create a trigger, case trigger, okay? And I'll go to case. Again, I don't want to give you too much example. I want you to understand the ones I'm giving you because that's all you need. Now, this example, a case is coming into the system. This case, chances are we might not have an email. Let me see. Email, primary case email. Okay, primary case email, chances are might not be present in the case that is coming in. What we want to do is, I want to find the primary email of the case from users. Okay? The same approach, the same thing we've done. I want to find the primary emails of the case from the user. And I want to replace the primary email based on what we have in the user. So now find the primary email of the case from users for a particular group. What does that mean? It means that, let's say a case does not have an email, but I know that certain group of users will be managing that case, okay? And I know that this user, the certain group of users will be managing the case. I want to find out the email so I can associate that case with that email. The same thing we've done for the account is what we're going to do. So typically, what we could have done is this, copy this, go to the case, okay? And just change this to case. I know it doesn't make sense because at the end of the day, you already know what the answer is, okay? Case record. Then you can just say case record owner, right? Then query from this, instead of department, you call it primary email, okay? Primary email, but you make sure that you have this in the user object. Then the primary email would now be what you want, and you just get it. So the account, instead of the account, you call it case record, and this is the primary case email. So we've done the same thing, but just on a case records. But this is a bad code. The reason why it's a bad code is because you cannot do query in a for loop. So let's quickly create the primary email on the user and the case object, okay? Primary case email. I go to my case object. I go to fields. I go to new. Then I go to email. I type in the primary case email. Okay, but I want it to be joined together. So now I have the primary case email field. I saved. I go to the user object. I type in, what can I type in the user object? I can just type in, I could just get a user email. I don't even need to type. I don't even need to catch. I can just get a user email because the user email would now be the primary case email if the email is not present in the case. Okay? So I don't need to get the user email. I'm telling you that this is wrong because you're querying inside a for loop. So how do you go about this? The first thing is create a set. Okay? Create a set. And what do you do with a set? Previously, we have IDs, right? We have IDs and we get all owners' IDs, right? But now we get all owners' IDs. Let me see. This was what we created before, right? But now we're not creating this. What do we need? Start from what do we need? What do we want to store? What are we collecting? Why do we need to store something? That is the first question you want to ask yourself. Right now, we want to get the owner IDs and we want to be able to find the department from the owner ID, which is fine. But for this use case, I want to get all the emails. So I don't necessarily need to have ID. I can just have string. String can be, emails can be stored as a string. So I can just say this is a set of all emails. Okay? That's a set of all emails. So now a case is being created. Let's loop through the case that is being created. Let's loop through it. Let's loop through the case. For case, the case that is being created in trigger.new. Now, I'm looping through all the cases, and guess what I'm doing? Guess what I'm doing for the case? I want to store what? I want to store case is coming into the system. We might not have a primary case email. We might not have it. What does that mean to you as a programmer? We might not have the primary case email. As a programmer, what does that mean to you if you're doing a for loop? If you're doing a for loop, what you want to do is you want to check. You want to check. You want to check the case dot primary case email. Okay? What do you want to check? If it is not null, if it is not null, that means if it is not empty, then you want to store, because you cannot store what doesn't exist. You have to store something that exists in the system. So now I'm adding what? I'm adding the case. Imagine if the primary case is null. You cannot add an empty object. You cannot add an empty data. It doesn't make sense. Okay? So now I have done the check and I'm good. Save. Let's see what happens. Okay? So save. I've done the first step, just like I did here. The only difference is here I'm storing ID, but here I'm just storing case, emails. Okay? This is step one. Okay? Step one, create a set. Create a set and store all emails, IDs, whatever you want to call it, for the case study you're trying to solve, right? Set of all emails, the collection. Loop through the case that is coming into the system. Trigger.new. If the primary case is not null, then grab the primary case and store it in your set. Step one done. Let's go to step two. Step two. What exactly are you trying to do? Why are we doing this? We're looking for possible users in the system. Find the primary email of the case from users for a particular group. That means I want to find out the user that is matching this primary case. Okay? I want to find out the user that is matching this primary case. I want to just find it, and I want to use maybe the ID of that user, or I want to be able to grab some items from that user record and put those items in the case that I am trying to create. Okay? So this could be maybe ID or whatsoever it is. Now, step two. What do I want to do? I want to query the user objects. List user, the users with the case. Okay, with the case email. My naming convention is very raw, right? But please don't use this. You can use this as work if you're very flexible, but ideally you don't want to be using something like this. You want to be using something very professional, or very that follows the design pattern of the enterprise you're working with. Okay, then I can just say select ID, okay, email from users. But remember, you want to put a clause. You want to put a clause. And what is the clause? Previously, we have where ID in the owner's IDs, right? But for this, we want to find out the ID of this primary case, right? Which is all emails. We want to find out the IDs, okay, for that email. So what is in your set? Your set contains email. So email. That's step 2, done. Now that we have the users that is matching this email, what do we want to do now? What do we want to do? We want to relate that case again, but we want to replace whatever we're interested in. Whatever it is that we're interested in, we want to replace it, okay? So let's say we want to go back to that loop again, but now we're not going to say, okay, we're not checking this. Or actually, we should be checking this, okay? We're saying, okay, for the case triggered on you, which is fine. If the primary case is not null, then I want to be able to do something. Or if the primary case is null, I want to be able to replace whatever users I've gotten here in here. But obviously that doesn't make sense. It's much better if you have something like this, because this is what gets you the user anyway. So ideally, you might want to be getting something from the user object that you want to update in the case. Okay, so whatever it is that you want to update in the case, you can now say, okay, case.department equals the same thing we did before. Just grab it and just put it here. But the only difference is that you just change this, right? Then you, instead of account owner, you just call it the case. Okay, but instead of owner ID, you call it email. Then you can grab department, something like this. That's perfect. That's perfect. The only difference is that it's going to fail because it probably doesn't know department in the case. Okay, department does not exist, and user is user, not users. Okay, so those kind of little things, and you're good. 33 says no email. So it says there is no email in a case. Is there no email in the case objects? It said there is no department, there is no email. So let's look for owner ID, something like that. Get ID of type list. So the owner ID is saying there's no department and it's void get ID from type list. So we just need to correct these two things and we're good. So the first thing is we want to create departments on the case objects. Okay, create department on the case objects. And once you create department on the case objects, just make sure that the case, which is this, that's what you want to do, right? You want to replace department, but we can just use anything. What can we use here? Let's just use something, or we can just create a department. That's not a problem. We create a department. Okay, we create a department. And we save that. Department should go now. Then it's saying get ID from type list. So it's saying that we have this type, okay? We have this type list and we are getting, we're using ID. So we can just say we want to get the email. I don't think there's email on case. That's strange. Is there no email on case? Okay, it's contact email. Okay. Anyway, actually, you can use supplied email or whatever it is, but let's just primary case. Okay, just get primary case. No. Okay, so pretty much what we've done before, the only method does not exist, incorrect, get ID. So you want to get ID. Just 1 minute. You want to get ID from, oh yeah, you're getting string type list. If the case is not null, okay. So basically, this is a list, and it's telling you that before you can, yeah, this is interesting. We missed one step. we've missed one step, okay? We've missed one step, and that's the map. We need to convert our list to map, okay? We missed one step because you cannot use .get on a list. You can use .get on a map, or you cannot use .get on a list, okay? So string of user, okay? And just say the email map equals new map, okay? Map of string and users, okay? Map of string and user, and what is a query? Or you can just put it like this, and because you already query this, then you can just add the map of that list. Alternatively, you can just put the query here, okay? I'm pretty sure you should be able to do this as well, okay? And not even that, because you already have the different ways you can just loop through this. Let's loop through this. It's much easier that way. You have this, okay? Then you can just kind of like create that map, okay? Because you already have the map. Just create the map for user, the user in the users in this. Then you want to the map dot. How do you add into a map? How do you add into a map? Puts. You use puts, okay? You use puts in a map. So the user dot email, which is a string, and the user, which is the user record. So this is a string and user. This is a string and this is a user, okay? So instead of doing all this, we could have just written it in one line like we did before. This line. We could have just done it like this as well. Do you get? So we could have just done everything we did here. Can you see? Programming is about how confident you are with coding. How confident you are with coding. One line of code. 5 lines of code. How confident you are. It depends on how your brain is processing the transaction. How your brain is processing the transaction. If the brain says, I want to declare it with a one-liner, it's okay. If the brain says, okay, let's first of all create a list. Now, let's instantiate a map. Now, let's run a for loop. It's also okay. It's also okay. But what is the difference between this and this? With this one, it works seamlessly because you're using ID. It works seamlessly because you're using ID. With this one, you have to break things down because specifically you want to use string, a map of string. So here you have a map of ID. Here you have a map of string. At the end of the day, you are still creating map. You're still instantiating a map. Okay. And now based on that, you can just use the map as something that you grab, not the other one. Okay. So that's how to solve the problem. The problem is the same as this one. We just use a different object and a different field. Okay. Please interpret the question whichever way you want to interpret the question. The bottom line is you're getting something that is coming from the system. You store that something in a list. You query an existing record in the system to look for that something that matches. Then you update your for loop again, but with much informed decision. That means you're not putting any query inside the for loop. You're not doing any logic inside the for loop. You're doing logic, but you're not doing any list query inside the for loop. Okay. let me put a pause here. I think someone has their hands raised. Tenny, do you have your hands raised up? Do you have any question? Do you have any questions, Tenny, before we move on? I think your hand was raised initially. Okay, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Okay, I was following. I actually took down my hand when you started using ID because I was going to ask you in step 2, right? When you said select ID, well, with my experience, sales was saying that emails are unique. Why can't we just deal with emails since they are unique instead of ID? I understand ID is important because IDs are unique as well. So that's why I was asking, especially in the case now.
Oh, yeah. So because IDs are unique, emails, what do you mean emails are unique? Emails are not unique, but to users, they are unique, right? But emails generally are not unique unless you make them unique. Do you get? In a case object, you can have a lot of emails that are the same because people submit cases, right? And it doesn't have to be unique in the case. Do you get? Do you get?
Yes, I understand now. All right.
Yeah. It's something you create. If you want something to be unique, fine. In a user object, chances are, when you're creating Salesforce users, I don't think emails are unique. I think the username are unique, but not emails. You can have 2 emails. Okay, you can have 2 emails in a sales. I can have the same user with the same email, but different username. Okay, username needs to be unique across all logs. Okay, let's quickly touch base on the basics of Apex that you already know, just to reinforce our knowledge on the basics of Apex again. We've learned so much in the last 3 weeks. One of them is the fact that we know what data types are. Data types. This is the foundation, the fundamentals. If you don't know what data types are, you cannot be a programmer because you don't know what you're storing, you don't know what you're retrieving. Okay? We know how to do data structure. Oh God, I wish I had this stuff when I was learning programming because it would be so easier for me. How do you get data? How do you retrieve data? You need to know this. If you don't know how to retrieve a data, then you cannot become a programmer. It's not okay storing data. You need to be able to retrieve data. Now, we know how to query data. And we know how to manipulate data in the database. This is very important, okay? This DML is very important because what would you do with data that you retrieve? You use DML transaction. DML transaction. We know control statements. Control statements. The for loop, the while, the do while, the switch, whatever it is. You know them. Why do you need them? You need them because you want to retrieve data from a structure. Data structure is how you can access data in a complex structure. I wouldn't call it complex, in a structure, in just a structure, whether it is a list, a set, a map. You know this. I've taught you this. Then now you have Apex trigger. Okay? Apex trigger is just like the before edits, after edits in your workflow rule, in your flow, in your process builder. These are the fundamentals of Apex. Without this, you cannot get that entry-level job as a developer. You need to know them. With what you know right now, you are good to start applying for an entry-level developer job. What we need to know going forward is we need to know what they call the visual first page. What is the visual first page? it is that HTML and CSS that you learned in your very first month of the training. The only difference is you're doing it the Salesforce way. Instead of div, you're using maybe Apex page or Apex this and Apex that, which I'm going to introduce you to next week. Okay? We have what they call the LWC, which is a Lightning Web Component. This is similar to Visual Force Page. The only difference is you are writing in JavaScript. The same JavaScript I introduced you to. As you can see, there is nothing to Apex other than what you've learned. However, you will be using Apex to create Visual Force Page. By using Apex, I mean the back end of your Visual Force page will be controlled by Apex programming. The back end of your Lightning Web Component will be controlled by Apex programming. And you need Experience Cloud understanding. I'm not going to teach you details of Experience Cloud, but you need that understanding in order to be able to work with Lightning Web Components. Okay? So we need to touch these 3 things in the next 3 weeks. But before we do that, we need to touch one last thing in Apex, which is test classes. We need to be able to write test classes. Whatever you're writing in Apex, you need to have what they call the code coverage. Your code coverage should be at least 75% for you to be able to deploy your Apex into production. For you to be able to deploy your Apex into production, you need what they call the Apex test classes, which needs to have at least 75% code coverage. We're going to be doing this tomorrow. Okay? So remember, next week, we're going to be touching Experience Cloud before we even touch Visual Force Page. Okay? We're going to be touching Experience Cloud, which is going to be introduction. And I'm going to ask Obi and Emilia to kind of like guide you through as well, because they actively work with Experience Cloud. Okay? Introduction to Experience Cloud. Then we have introduction to Lightning Web Components. Okay? I think lastly, we should come back to Visual Force Page because people are fading out on Visual Force Page. It's not really actively used in the market anymore. It's mostly used by old enterprise that are the early adopters of Salesforce. Okay? It is still being used. I will teach you, but it is not actively used compared to LWC and flows. Okay? LWC and flows are really used. Experience Cloud is actively used, but it requires a different certification on its own. Okay? But I'm going to introduce you to Experience Cloud, and I'll let Obi and Emilia take over from there, maybe on a weekend basis, whereby they can sharpen your skills and you guys can start learning stuff. Okay? So I can either teach you Experience Cloud and Visual Force Page next week, then we do LWC, okay, the week after, whichever way you want. I will, based on the way I see your speed. I'm going to give you another project on what we've learned, and I will see how you guys are coping with that. Okay, so this is the outlook for the next 3 weeks. Okay, tomorrow we're going to have this. Next week we're having this, and the week after we're having this. Then we have a group project. You have an individual project after Experience Cloud, another individual projects where you have to create your CV. Create your CV using Experience Cloud. Okay? Which is going to be similar. I think I should let you learn JavaScript before I give you that project. Then after that, we're going to have the DevOps process for Salesforce, whereby you learn SFDX and how to retrieve and deploy your code from the Visual Studio Code. Okay, so you're not going to be using Apex Console because at work you're going to be using SFDX. This skill is very in high demand, and any developer interview you go for, if you don't have this, they wouldn't take you. Okay, please don't miss this class for any reason. Please do not miss this class for any reason, because that's where you will learn things that is not even in charge. You will not even see Salesforce, and you'll be controlling what you have in your org. Okay, so we have a lot to cover, but we have to take things gradually. I'm not rushing you guys. I'm not in a rush because I know what you guys will be made up of after the training. You can even go back to the video and watch. You understand that even after you get a job, you will still need this video because that's what you'll be doing at work. Okay, so before we close for tonight, let me quickly touch one or two things in terms of Apex classes. Okay, when you write Apex classes, right, you always declare public. You always declare public. Why do you always declare public? You declare public because you want to use whatever method you're creating. You want to use it and you want people to be able to call that method. Okay? You want people to be able to call that method. Public means that this method will be available in a class such as this trigger class. That means I can say, I can initialize Apex, basic Apex, new basic Apex instance equals new basics Apex. Boom. Because you've declared this as public, then you can use it anywhere as long as you instantiate it. You can use it anywhere. But if you declare it as private, you cannot use it anywhere besides this class. Okay? This is what they call the access modifier. So it can be private class, it can be public, and it can be global. So global is if you want to use it for a call out, like API integration and stuff like that. Okay? It's called global. So remember, public, private, or global. And it has to do with where you can use it. Private, that means you can only use it on this file. Okay? There's also what they call protected, but you probably don't need it. Protected class, right? It is only available inside here. That means you cannot use it outside of, like, you cannot use this class outside like this. It's not going to work. It has to be inside whatever method. That's why it's called protected. Okay? It's called protected because it is only available inside this. And I also taught you what is called overloading. What is overloading in basic Apex? Overloading means that you have a class which is string, okay, employee, no, basic Apex, right? Remember when I taught you basic Apex and I said you have a constructor like this, okay? Then you can also say you have a constructor like this, right? Integer I. Then you have a constructor like this, integer I and string X. This is overloading. You're overloading the class, meaning that the class can do a lot of things. The class can do a lot of things. You just need to be able to pass in the required inputs for that class. So basic Apex can collect nothing, can collect an integer, and a string. In addition to that, you also have what they call the final. What is final? Final means that is a constant. Is a constant final string, meaning that cannot be changed. 3.14. What is 3.14? 3.14 is pi, right? Pi value. I just gave you a constant. So if you want to use a constant that will never be changed throughout the entire programming, you can declare it like this. What most people usually do at work is they take all the constants. They say, let's say you're developing an application called lead app, right? Lead constants. Then they put all the constants in a file like this. And whenever they need constants, all they need to do is go and call the constants. So you can track all your constants, string the constants. Then you know that the value of constants called pi is found in the lead constants. Then you can always manipulate all the constants in one file, and you can always call them in any apex. Okay? So remember, you have the constants, which works like this: public static final string. Everything we've been doing so far, it is running based on a sharing mode. It is running based on a sharing mode. That means if you do not declare a sharing mode in your public declaration, it is running by default in a system context, meaning that I can have access to all the data. Remember, in Apex, we have what I call the sharing settings. The sharing settings, which is public read write, public read and the likes. And we have the profile for the user. So far, every query I've written does not put into consideration whether the user I'm using to query that object has access to that object. I did not put all those conditions there, but it is running without sharing. If you wanted to consider the user's accessibility of those records, then you put with sharing. There's so many things that you probably need to know, but you have to know it as part of your own reading. I cannot imagine all the possible use cases of Apex. I can only give you tips. So if you want the sharing to be enforced, you have to put with sharing, meaning that anytime I run Apex, only those that have access to this class will be able to run this class. So if you want to grant access, permission sets, right? Not even permission set. Go to the profile. Go to sales profile. Okay? And there is enable Apex class access. Edit it and add all those Apex that you've created. So this profile will now have access to that Apex class that you've written. So are you getting this gist? Everything in Salesforce is highly configurable, but you need to know what exactly you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you'll be struggling. But the only way to know what you're doing is by showing interest in what I am teaching you. Because what I'm teaching you is the peripherals. It's like the surface of Apex. If we have to go deep into Apex, we might not end this in a year, because even those that are working as a developer don't know everything about Apex. But you need to be able to go to developer.salesforce.com and go through all those things I have touched in class. Writing Apex, running Apex, debugging Apex, testing Apex. Tomorrow, we're going to go into this. If you're a smart student or someone that is interested in learning without being spoon-fed, you have to go and find out everything about testing Apex. So when we're teaching it in class, it becomes easier for you to understand. Okay? So please, guys, I've said a lot tonight, but remember, we are going to continue with Apex test class tomorrow, and next week, we're going to do Experience Cloud, Introduction, and Visual Force page. The week after, we're going to do LWC, and lastly, we're going to do the DevOps process. So we have about 3 weeks of training to go before I can put you forward to start applying for jobs. But during that time, you would also be doing your work experience if you've signed up for it. And after your LWC, you'll be doing your group project, which is very intense. That group project is a deciding factor for you to even consider applying for a job. If you don't do well in the group project, or if you struggle with a group project, then you should probably look into becoming a technical consultant, not a core developer, because core developer will test your ability to code, but technical consultant might not necessarily require you to code. I have some people I work with, they're developer, but they don't write code. They just know how to read code and maybe interpret code. Okay, so that's all for me for tonight. Do you guys have any questions before we stop the class? Any question? Please raise your hand if you have any question based on what we said. Sagar, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Yeah, so my question is, so for those who are not available to do the worker experience due to like job during the day, would we have like other opportunity to do it after hours or something like that?
I don't know what you mean. I've already selected the people that will be working for the work experience. If you're not called, that means you have either indicated that you cannot work without getting paid, or you're not available to work any hours of the day, or you have some criteria that has been filtered out for you not to take on that work experience. So you will get the opportunity to work as part of a group for your developers project, but it's not going to be in a setting of work experience, i.e., it's not going to be like you have a BA, you have a consultant, you have a developer, you have a scrum master and the likes. You just have your group project and everyone in your group will be a developer working on a solution. Okay? That's the experience you're going to have compared to work experience whereby you're working as part of a team of a BA, scrum master, developer, and the likes. Okay? So know the difference and that would help you. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Any other question before we end the class? Any other question? Okay. I think everyone is good. I'm looking into your solution. If you did not send your solution yesterday, please still send it. It's very important. You don't want to be in this class and not be recommended for a developer's role. In as much as it's not a good thing, it might be a good thing for you just for the learning's sake. But then again, the end goal of you being in this class is to be able to work as a developer. So you not submitting your projects is just you telling me that, man, I don't think I want to do this, which is fair. But then again, you want to achieve your end goal, right? You want to be able to work as a Salesforce developer. Okay? I think that's all from me. Take care, everyone. All the best. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone. Bye.